Good afternoon or evening, wherever you are in the world. I'm Kate Folb. I'm director of Hollywood Health and Society, which is a program of the USC Annenberg School Norman Lear Center. It's a mouthful, but we're delighted today to partner with the Writers Guild of America West's Women's Committee to bring you this event. We at Hollywood Health and Society know how much stories matter, how much entertainment matters, and how much the facts matter. For over 20 years, we've been helping TV and screenwriters get the facts they need to make their stories accurate and impactful. And we do this all free of charge. For those of you who don't know us, we're a free resource for entertainment content creators. We can connect you with information and experts and real people with lived experience on all topics of health, safety, and security. All you have to do is call or email us with questions for your scripts and projects, and we understand your timelines and we'll get back to you soon. We're here to help. So, family planning has been in the news a lot of late. And although we're not focusing on abortion tonight, we are going to look at how breast cancer can affect one's family planning. And we have some folks with personal stories that run the gamut of options. Tonight's moderator is a breast cancer survivor herself and an Emmy and Grammy nominated stand-up comedian, writer, radio contributor, and actor. In fact, Rolling Stone named her one of the 50 best stand-up comics of all time. She wrote and starred in the groundbreaking TV show One Mississippi on Amazon, and she hosts a great advice podcast called Don't Ask Tig, which I highly recommend. And she's going on tour in January. Please welcome Tig Notaro.
Hi. Thank you. Yes, I'm happy to be asked to be a part of this. I was diagnosed with bilateral breast cancer in 2012. And it's crazy to me that I'm coming up on 10 years, and I'm happy to be a part of this because, I mean, obviously, unfortunately, we still need this, but happy to remind people and inform people that there are resources out there, and it's so important to utilize them, because I know that when I was diagnosed, I think, like so many people, my mind went blank. I just felt isolated and alone, and I forgot that there are people out there that want to help and want to keep conversations going and lead people in the right direction. So I just want to say that that's why I'm happy to be here. I was, gosh, I'm not good at math, but I think I was 40 or 41 when I was diagnosed. 40. Listen, it was 9 years ago. I'm 50. You do the math. But I was diagnosed, and I did not have any history of cancer, no known history in any relatives that I even knew of with breast cancer. And it was truly shocking. I was in denial about it. I had felt lumps, but I just didn't believe that I could possibly have cancer, which I think is very typical of people also, is, and you hear it all the time, that people think, oh, that's somebody else's story. That's not for me. And I was one of those people. in finding out, I do stand up, as Kate mentioned, even though Rolling Stone listed me as one of the top 50 best comedians of all time. That was years ago. I've probably fallen off of that ranking. But my life really came to a halt, and I had a double mastectomy, and I was told that the doctor felt that she got all of the cancer in the surgery, and I then went on to meet with different doctors for, potentially getting reconstructive surgery. And after meeting, I think, with 3 different surgeons, I decided that was not for me, and never got reconstructive surgery. I think it's a very personal choice for different people. And I had been ill with an intestinal disease, unrelated, as well as had pneumonia. I had all sorts of health issues going on, and I was very weak at the time. And I remember my oncologist wanting to do chemo, but feeling like I just wasn't in a very stable place with my health in a general sense. And so we just did the double mastectomy, and then I started my tamoxifen hormone blocking treatment, which I just finished a few years ago, because I ended up having some complications from that medication, which can happen, but a lot of times doesn't. But I am in remission now, and I have used so many of my experiences with my health, cancer, and when I had C. diff, that intestinal disease, everything, all of my complications, and bumps in the road, to say the least, over the past 9 years, has all ended up in my stand-up, and on my albums, on my specials, my TV show. There was a documentary. I've shared everything. Wrote a book. In fact, before my diagnosis, I rarely shared anything personal. I was so observational. I told the story of other people or what I saw, and I think that when I felt like I had nothing else to lose, because I had felt like I lost everything. In 4 months, I was diagnosed with C. diff, the intestinal disease, pneumonia, invasive breast cancer. My mother tripped and hit her head and died. And I went through a breakup in 4 months. And I just was like, well, I have nothing to lose. So I felt very compelled to share my story. I had so much going on in my head, and I feel so so thankful for the audiences that have shown up to hear my jokes, and watch my shows, and read my book, and get what they can out of my experience. And it's so powerful to have that exchange. And so that's what I think is going to be incredible about this evening, is everybody sharing their experiences, their stories. And I think before we get into, well, first of all, I want to mention who all is here this evening. Dr. Dizon is here, Jennifer and Jay Feldman, as well as Jessica QUELLER. And we will start by talking to Dr. Dizon. And welcome. You are on mute still.
Sorry about that. It's truly an honor to be here. And I want to thank the CDC for helping to arrange this. So I am a professor of medicine in what's called the research scholar track here at Brown University. And I see patients at the Lifespan Cancer Institute in Providence, Rhode Island. My specialty is in what I term pelvic malignancies. And these are the malignancies of the ovaries, the uterus, and the cervix. And I also treat breast cancer. As part of my work, as it has evolved, I also am a specialist in sexual health, and that oftentimes will touch on fertility. And I also do work in social media and how we can use social media to sort of change conversations. And part of what I do and have done for a long time is I keep a couple of columns on social media for both professional journals within the oncology community and something called the American Society of Clinical Oncology Connection. And the stories I tell are the human aspects of being in oncology. I think for so long, and probably even to today, most of us meet this perception that oncologists know what to do and that you need to listen to us if you want to live. And that's not the truth. Most of us experience oncology in a very human way, and we live through the emotions that our patients go through from an initial diagnosis to the point that when I meet a new patient with a new diagnosis of cancer, one of the first things I tell them, if I believe it to be true, is that they are not dying and they can look forward to a life despite this illness. And this is really where the fertility conversation comes in. And although our societies worldwide have recognized that fertility preservation, just making sure people understand that they can still be parents after cancer, is such an important conversation to have when someone is diagnosed. It is still not happening. In fact, for young people, 1 in 5 recall having that conversation about how they can be parents. And the hard thing about that is when someone survives their cancer, it is one of the biggest sources of regret and sadness that an option for becoming a parent has been taken away right now. And I have several patients with ovarian cancer, cervical cancer, as well as breast cancer, all of them under the age of 45. And all of them grappling with these questions of their own mortality and their desires to become mothers as well as just parents, and grappling with these questions of, should I have a child and what happens if the cancer comes back? And I think it's important for us in oncology to provide that sort of perspective that this is an experience that's going to change people. And we talk about something called the new normal after a cancer diagnosis, but that doesn't have to be bad, that someone can grow through a cancer experience and share so much that they discover about themselves, much like you have done with your own experiences. And people grow from the experience. And there are lessons to be told and stories to be told. And I hope we get to a lot of those stories today from very different perspectives. So I'm really grateful to be here.
That's great. That's very helpful, I'm sure, for many people to hear. So can you let us in on, maybe what the macro perspective on what women are facing, considering risks, health access, and just all of that around breast cancer. Just
right.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I think one of the things that if through storytelling, we could break through and have people understand is that breast cancer isn't just one disease, and the experience that, you know, women have around breast cancer are so different. And we're learning they're different, you know, by each person, and not one person can live their own experience by seeing what someone else went through. So there's three main types of breast cancer today. There's hormone receptor positive breast cancers, there's HER2 positive breast cancers, and there's triple negative breast cancers. All of them have different implications in terms of how we approach them, but also prognosis. So we need to try to explain that to our patients that go through it, but everyone has the same experience when they first hear the diagnosis. And it's after you have that deer in the headlights look from hearing breast cancer applied to you, it's then thinking about lost opportunities and a fear of the future. Will I live to see next year? Will I live to see 5 years from now? And I think where an oncologist can help is we can help ground people into expectations and really address those fears outright. Fears that they will die of cancer, fears that the chemotherapy, if they have to have it, is going to leave them debilitated, if not changed. And more, fears of what treatment for cancer, whether it's a surgery, whether it's the radiation, the medical treatments, the pills, or the chemo, it's going to do to them as sexual human beings, you know. And I think one of the hardest things I've heard from people, and I've heard this from multiple people, they use the term damaged after cancer. And if they're married or if they're in relationships, you know, their intimacy is different. Their experiences of touch are different. In fact, the way they experience orgasms are different. In fact, pain might be the predominant experience of intimate encounters, and nothing about it makes sense. And so many women, and I have to say men as well, but so many women use the term I've been damaged. And I think that's one of the things that I think is heartbreaking as an oncologist who also specializes in sexual health. But at least what I bring to the table is not only the experience of what we're going to do to cure you, if it's a curable situation, and what we're going to do to try to control your cancer now. Because the emphasis is not only in keeping the cancer under control or getting rid of it, the emphasis is on maintaining who someone is right now and trying our best to help people realize their own goals and their preferences. So getting that 26-year-old back to college so she can get a degree, or getting that woman whose fiance wants to postpone their wedding and letting them both know that they can plan a future, and then making or helping that person realize that, you know what, it is okay if you want to try to get pregnant after breast cancer. That's
And
actually okay.
And so, what can survivors expect as far as family planning and fertility and going about that? I know for myself, I can happily say that I'm happily married with 2 children now. I can't believe my life 9 years later. But what's your take on it?
Mhm. Well, I think the best case scenario for people facing a new diagnosis of breast cancer is if their oncologist offers them the opportunity to discuss what's called fertility preservation. What are your options to save your ability to produce your own eggs, to undergo in vitro fertilization so you can collect embryos, so that in the future, when you are ready, you can access them. The best time to have that conversation, to start that process, is before we, as medical oncologists, start on medical treatments. But, you know, I speak around the country around issues on sexuality as well as on fertility. And there are those women who either were not afforded the chance to have that procedures done, or the reality of many, they didn't have the means to afford the fertility preservation procedures. So for those women who never had the opportunity to have fertility preservation, I think one of the other things I do to provide hope is to mention other ways to become a parent. You know, there are things that can be performed, you know, egg donation, gestational surrogacy, even adoption. These are things that people oftentimes, I find, don't know are options or don't feel that they can access them. So even if your opportunity to have your own genetically related child was taken away from you because of cancer, you can still have you can still parent, you can still have a child, and the bond between you as a mother or a father and that child will be as strong as any bond naturally developing.
Yeah, you know, I remember my own experience. I feel like it's changed in the past 9 years, but maybe maybe I'm wrong, which is oftentimes the case. But I feel like my oncologist, she really did not want me to try to have my own children because, I mean, not, you know, but she said that the treatment could be like gas to the flame if there is any cancer cell still in my body.
Mhm.
And then I've also read conflicting information about that as well.
Yeah, and I think that's so there's still this element, and I think Jay and Jennifer will get into this. There's an element of paternalism where
Mhm.
we look at the patient in front of us, the person in front of us who's dealing with cancer, and particularly if it's an aggressive type of breast cancer, or even in my world, ovarian cancers or uterine cancers, where we are actually afraid of the delay to medical treatment. And we can, you know, impart this sort of paternalistic view of things, saying, it's in your best interest to move to chemotherapy right away and not do any of this stuff. It's the same thing that applies to pregnancy after cancer, this sort of idea that a pregnancy will increase your risk of dying of breast cancer, when in fact the data supports there's an effect that has been seen in multiple studies, both in Europe and the United States. And I speak about it quite a lot. It's called the healthy mother effect. So if your body is healthy enough to get pregnant and then carry that pregnancy to term, in fact, that is a good prognostic indicator as far as cancer is
Hmm.
concerned.
That's really interesting to
Yeah,
hear.
yeah.
Okay. Well, everything that you have shared is very, very helpful, and I'm certain there's a ton of people quite appreciative, and we're going to have to move on to our next panelist. Thank you, Doctor. We are moving on to Jennifer and Jay Feldman. Welcome.
Hi,
Hello, thank you for
Hi.
having us.
Yes, thanks for being here.
it's our pleasure.
So, yeah. Jennifer, you were diagnosed with breast cancer just 3 months after you were married at the age of 27.
Yes, that's
Um,
correct.
yeah. So walk us through your reaction at the time in your life and what that was like for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like you said, I was 27 and we had just recently gotten married. So for us, you know, beyond the talks of like, let's get married and eventually have a family, we hadn't really, you know, started that process yet. And it was as simple as I was changing for bed one night and felt something painful, felt a lump in my chest and immediately panicked and assumed the worst. But it was late on a Friday night, so there really wasn't a lot that I could do about it until Monday morning. And I immediately, you know, called my physician and called my OB and just said, who can get me in first? Like, I need to see somebody today. And they sent me in for mammograms, and it was those like scary moments where they say, we're going to run the tests again and let me put you into a small room to talk to you. And you think nothing good is going to come from this moment. And sure enough, I had a very large tumor growing in my left breast. And from there, it was, this onslaught of tests and doctors and surgeons and everyone sort of giving us their opinions on what we should do. And the truth is, at that time, fertility preservation was not on anybody's to-do list of what we should talk about, despite the fact that I was so young and newly married. And when it did work its way into the initial conversation, my first oncologist, who sort of spearheaded my treatments and all my protocols, really was adamant that I should not do anything, not even preserve eggs, not try to do anything at all, because he felt that, A, I should have surgery and chemo and do all of that immediately. And B, I was otherwise a healthy 27-year-old. So I kept being told, just do these processes, go on your tamoxifen for 5 years. And in 5 years, you'll get a clean bill of health and you'll be fine and you'll carry your own baby to term and all will be well. And unfortunately, that's not what happened. But it was really not something that people advocated for us. And unfortunately, at the time, we didn't know we needed to advocate it harder for ourselves on that issue. And I think even to this day, that's a regret that we hold on to, and something that we, second guess for sure.
It's so hard to know all of those things. I always tell everybody, you need a medical degree for this type of diagnosis. Otherwise, you don't know how to navigate. I mean, there are people that you can help, that can help you, resources at the hospital and friends that you can bring. But a lot of times, again, it is that deer in the headlight, and you don't even think, is there somebody that can help me here at the hospital to navigate this? Or, and it's interesting to hear you talk about, you hear it all the time about, aside from the cancer, you're a healthy 27-year-old. It's so interesting to hear. If you didn't have this thing that could potentially kill you, if it goes untreated, you are completely fine.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I don't even know where to put that information. Now, and then 5 years later, you felt a lump near your collarbone. Is that right?
Yeah, so it was actually right before I hit that 5-year clean bill of health mark. We were counting down. We actually had been talking about, we're ready, let's figure out what we need to do to try and get pregnant and have a child. And, let's find doctors to talk to. Let's educate ourselves. I'm about to get off the tamoxifen. What do we need to do? And I felt a small bump on my collarbone. And at that time, I went to my oncologist and said, I feel a lump and I want this checked out. And he actually really didn't want me to. He felt like, you know what, it's probably nothing. I think we should just watch it and see what happens for a couple months. And I just looked him dead in the eye and said, or what else? Because I'm not leaving here until you order some scans and tests. You can prove me wrong, but I'm not going home without a scan. And so he ordered the test, and it turned out that I actually had 3 new tumors growing in my chest. And we were devastated. And I think that having children at that point was the biggest crushing blow, because it just was well, that's not happening right now. But I immediately fired my oncologist, and I turned to an organization called Charcheret, which then pointed me in the direction of Hopkins Second Opinion Clinic. And we, had everything reviewed from top to bottom, because at that point I just lost all confidence in the medical team that I had and felt like I wasn't given good advice. And I just was questioning it all. And we put a new team in place and came up with new plans. And that team included a fertility doctor who had experience working with cancer patients. And she very much advocated for us to do a round of fertility preservation before I went back down the cancer path for the second time.
Yeah, I think it's really important to make sure that the specialists have knowledge in the world of cancer. just with all of those different areas, because it's so specific.
Mhm.
And so you and Jay took the step of freezing your embryos, and
Yeah.
but you didn't find out that chemotherapy could damage
I can touch on that.
So yeah, you want to talk about it?
Sure. So,
damage the eggs until later.
Right. So just to back up a little bit, the first time, the first diagnosis, somehow we were turned on to go meet with a fertility doctor about just to understand what this meant, because Jennifer's cancer was estrogen receptor positive. Part of the concern was that was explained to us is, and you touched on this a few minutes ago, is that the estrogen from pregnancy could feed cancer, and so there's a risk. So we just wanted to get better educated, and it was kind of like on one shoulder we had devil, one shoulder we had the angel. Like the fertility doctor was saying, "You're 27, you have stage 1 cancer, you should do this." And then on the other shoulder was the oncologist who said, "You're 27, you're healthy, you'll get through this, and you'll be perfectly capable of getting pregnant naturally." At that point. So the once the second diagnosis came back, and you know, it was tough because we were young kids at 27. Even if we wanted to pursue fertility preservation, we vaguely understood how costly it can be, and we just kind of said, we can't do this now. Like, we don't have the financial means to do this anyway, and we're going to put our faith in the doctors and put our faith in our higher power, and just believe and be optimistic that we'll be able to do this. So fast forward, the once we found out what the news story was, and once we decided that Jennifer really said, "I don't care what anybody says. We're gonna get our eggs, and we're gonna make embryos." And we started doing our research, and we spoke to a specialist in New York who actually said to us, "No, gee, it's too bad you didn't do this the first time, because when you have chemotherapy, it actually damages and ages the eggs by about 10 years." And we were like literally floored. We were shocked to learn this. We were shocked to find out that nobody told us this. We just, we're frustrated and disappointed in ourselves for not having had the wherewithal to learn this and find this out. And before chemo and before radiation started, we went on this journey, and it was difficult. Some of the family stuff involved. We had some family members who, over the years, just based upon their previous experiences or what they believed or what they had read, also had concerns about the estrogen receptor positive aspect, and was concerned that if Jennifer was to get pregnant, or even just going through the IVF process and having injections and having her estrogen levels increase, that it could put her at risk. And we had some very heated conversations with some family members, and they said, "Oh, you should just go with adoption instead. You don't have to do this." And it's obviously a personal choice. For us, it was based upon the medical guidance that we were receiving, and just in our heart of hearts, if we had the ability to, we really wanted to be able to have our own biological child, our children. My mom's adopted, so I mean, adoption's a wonderful thing, but that's something that we didn't want to jump to. So it was definitely an adventure and a journey, and every step of the way, as we kind of went through this, both of us have always been very open. And when we find out about friends, or friends come to us now and ask if we'll speak to their friends, because there's not a lot of information out there. People are grasping at what direction do they go, what should they be doing. And to the original oncologist, his position to kind of dissuade us from that, I don't fault him for that. His job was to fight the cancer, and was to get Jennifer through this, and to make sure that she survived this. However, when you talk to different specialists, it's like a blinders are on. They're focused on their specialty, on what their emphasis is, their role in the whole process. And you know, thankfully, we're very blessed that, you know, we have a 3.5-year-old daughter now, and you know, we've just started sharing with some close friends and family that we're now on the journey for a second to expand our family, hopefully, knock on wood, working with the same gestational carrier. And that's what we ended up doing, was using a gestational carrier. And that's where we are.
Incredible. And you mentioned in your story, Jay, that you were surprised when Jennifer expressed appreciation for you for being by her side through this journey. And it's a real fear that a significant other or spouse may leave upon such a diagnosis. But that wasn't an option for you. What was the experience like from your eyes?
Yeah, so we, like, as you mentioned, this first occurred 3 months after we got married. So it was already kind of like newlyweds and building a life together. And I think, like, whether that's the stage of your relationship or whether it's many years down the road, and unfortunately we had both of those scenarios. You just do what you have to do. You know, you just make the adjustments in life, and you make the pivots that you need to make. And we were living in California at the time, away from our family, so we didn't have any family around either. We were fortunate to have Jen's mom and sisters come out and stay with us for periods of time, but I mean, it was just the two of us, really. And you know, when you're with your partner and it's you know, the sun sets and rises with your partner, there's no other option. And so throughout the process, as you know, Jennifer one night looked at me and said, "Thank you for being with me. Thank you for staying with me." And I was kind of like shocked, like, "What are you talking about? What do you mean, thank you? Like, don't say thank you." You know, she's like, "No, I've been reading and learning and understanding that a lot of women, their significant others end up deciding that they can't handle this, or that it's not what they signed up for, or that you know, it's too much for them." And that's not even a possible reality for me. So I just, hearing that was kind of surprising to hear, but to learn that that's what some people go through, unfortunately, you know, for us, that just wasn't an option. And, you know, is not an option.
Yeah, it's something I personally relate to, in that I had the same feelings and have those feelings at times when I feel so vulnerable, when I've had my ups and downs with my health. And I am so thankful that my wife has stayed with me in all of those emotions and conversations. And she's like, "What? I wouldn't leave you because you're ill or struggling." And it took me turning the tables and thinking, if Stephanie was ill, would I be out the door? No, nobody would pry me from her side. And
Right.
so I think it's, you know, it's good to think about that too. It's, yeah. Anyway, I'm glad all is well, and congrats on your family. And
Thank you.
we're moving on to our final panelist. And after Jessica, we are going to open it up to a Q&A to our viewers. So Jessica Queller. Hi. So
Go ahead.
sure. You want to just talk? Do you want to share anything right off the bat?
I can just launch into an overview of what qualifies me to be on the panel, if you
I
want.
also have some questions written down here for you, and you can also just share whatever you'd like to share.
Well, I'll just give the brief story and then we can talk.
Okay.
So I have never had cancer. I'm what's known as a previvor. I have the BRCA1 mutation. And so my mother was diagnosed with stage 2 breast cancer when she was 51 years old. And she beat the cancer in full remission. And then when she was 58 years old, she was diagnosed with a separate primary ovarian cancer. And this was stage 3C. And she was told she had 5 years to live, her life expectancy. And in fact, she lived less than 2. So when my mother was diagnosed with the ovarian cancer, I was 31 years old. I had just gotten, it was 2001, I had just gotten my first job as a TV staff writer that I'd been fighting, to break into this profession. And I was just like, I'm beginning my life. I'm on my feet. I have a career. I'm making a salary. And then 9/11 happened. And then my maternal grandmother died suddenly. And then right after that, my mother was diagnosed with ovarian cancer. So she was never tested for the BRCA mutation. When she was diagnosed in 2001, the test had been around for about 5 years, and she was being treated at NYU Hospital in New York. And in retrospect, I find it astonishing that no one brought up the BRCA test to her, because she had both breast and ovarian cancer. But they were, everyone gets very focused on their area. So the ovarian cancer oncologist was focused on saving her, helping her, and no one looked at that. My best friend from high school said to me, again, I'm 31 years old at the time, she happened to be on a committee of a cancer charity, and she had heard about this cutting edge new test for something called the BRCA gene. And she said, I think because your mom had both breast and ovarian cancer that you're a candidate. You should take this test. And I said, I'm not worried about myself. I'm 31 years old. I'm worried about my mom. That's good to know, but I'm not dealing with that right now. So then my mom had the most horrific illness. I hope I've never experienced anything like that again in my life. And she died at the age of 60. And my sister and I would say, are still traumatized from that experience. And on the heels of my mom's death, I'm now 33, and I had taken time off from my new career to go to take care of her in New York. And I go back to LA, and I got hired on the Gilmore Girls, one of my favorite shows, as a writer. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm 33. I want to fall in love. I want to have a life. I want to find a partner. I want to have a family. I want to, get back into the game of the living. And I had a to-do list of all the things I had been neglecting while I was caring for my mom. Like, I needed to renew my driver's license. I needed to get my teeth cleaned. And on that mundane list, I said, I should really get that genetic test just for the clean bill of health. I'm sure I don't have it. There's no other cancer in our family, but I'll just do that. So I went down the list. I got the genetic test. I got no counseling. I cut all the corners. And then I got a very horrible phone call from a strange doctor from a lab who did not know who I was or why I had taken this test, who told me, you tested positive. And I was so ignorant. I said, positive, is that a bad thing? Because positive sounded like a good word for a minute.
Sounds really positive.
Right. I was like, wait, that's bad, right? And he said, very bad. You are statistically assured of getting cancer, goodbye. And so then I got the results in the mail from Myriad Lab, which said I had an 89% chance of breast cancer, most likely before the age of 50, and a 44% chance of ovarian cancer. Good luck. I promptly took that paper and put it in a drawer and locked it and blocked it out for a few months. My best friend from college, Kenya, did an intervention. She did the research on her own, and she said, very aggressively, I love you. This is one of the only preventable cancers. You have to have a double mastectomy. You can get perky new boobs. It's going to be fine. You're not going to die. You're going to do this. And we got into a fight, and I said, back off, leave me alone. And then She was very tricky. She was an assistant op-ed editor at the op-ed page of the New York Times. And she said, how would you like to write an op-ed piece about this? I pitched it to my boss and he's interested. At which point my writer ambition was like, me write an op-ed piece for the New York Times? In that case, I'll become an expert. I'll learn everything about it. Yes. So I came home from writing on Gilmore Girls every night, and I'm reading everything I could find and speaking to oncologists around the country. And naturally the education was I did publish the article in 2004 and it changed my life, but I also realized I'm in trouble. This is not just an article. This is not good. So I ended up being on the forefront. So I basically wrote this op-ed piece identical to Angelina Jolie's a decade before her. I'd like to say it now that Angelina did it, I'm like, oh, it's very easy to explain what I have. I'm without the beauty, wealth, movie star, all of that, but same story. So I decided, I went on this odyssey. I published the New York Times article. It got a tremendous amount of attention because it was so new. It was not in the zeitgeist yet that there was such thing as a breast cancer gene and that there was a test for it and that you could take it, and that it was predominantly found in the Ashkenazi Jewish pool. So all the Jewish mothers in New York went crazy where I grew up. And then the op-ed piece became a book. And from the storytelling aspect, I feel like I coped with the situation through writing, and it made me feel like I could somehow do something productive with this traumatic situation. And it helped. And it also made me feel like my mother's death was not going to be in vain if I could help others by sharing that experience. I felt so I decided, once I knew the statistics and I spoke to the oncologists around the country and I heard the real facts, I decided I needed to have a preventive double mastectomy right away. And then I needed to have a baby somehow right away. And then I needed my ovaries out right away. And a ton of people thought I was crazy because this was not something that was done at that time, really, and certainly not by a young woman who was, single. And oncologists thought I was crazy. Not just, I went on Nightline, and Cokie Roberts, who was a breast cancer survivor herself, asked me the question on Nightline, do people think that you're crazy? And I said, they probably, I think some people do, but I knew that I was making the same decision because I would not have been able to make that decision had I not experienced the excessive horror of my mother's second illness. But I was certain that if there was any way for me to prevent cancer and chemotherapy and the whole thing, that I was going to do that. But I also was certain, since I was a little girl, my dream was always to be a mother. And I never imagined my wedding, or I imagined carrying a baby. I always had a picture of myself pregnant. I dreamed of, I don't know why, it wasn't so wonderful, but I wanted to carry a baby, and that was my dream. And I was like, I'm going to do that no matter how. If I can, I will do that. But if I couldn't, I was going to have a baby by whatever means necessary. So I ended up on my own, and there were romantic partners around, and there were some people who offered to go through the journey with me. But then I was like, well, I don't really love him, but he's really nice. Like, should I do that? But in the end, I'm too pure and too much of a romantic to do anything like that. So I had the double mastectomy preventively, and then I went to the sperm bank, to the California Cryobank, and it took me 9 months of trying to get pregnant. And then my daughter is now 12 years old. Wow. And right immediately after I had Sophie, I had my ovaries removed about a month later. I also had other help. During my pregnancy, they found a nodule in my thyroid, and they did, and so it was. I've had a lot of almost cancers. So they did several biopsies and couldn't decide if they were inconclusive. So they said, you might have thyroid cancer, but we can't tell you till after you have the baby. when we take your thyroid out and biopsy it. So
Oh my gosh.
in there, but I did not, it was negative. But I didn't know that until later. But so right after I had the baby, I had my thyroid out, I had my ovaries out. I basically have no organs left in my body, but
Same.
it's okay. And then I was a single mother by choice for 10 years. And I ultimately found a partner and got married in September. And now we're the Brady Bunch. My husband is Brady, so we're the Brady Bunch. And my daughter has a stepfather and 2 stepchildren, siblings, and life.
That's awesome. And how do you talk to your daughter about
her
yeah.
So Sophie is 12, and
Mhm.
I have been, open with her since she could talk, that she was a sperm donor baby. And luckily we live in very liberal Los Angeles, where in her section of kindergarten, there were 3 single mothers by choice, and everybody had 2 moms or 2 dads. So she never thought it was anything unusual until she went to sleepaway camp back east. And, they're like, who's your dad? And she's like, I'm from a sperm bank. And everyone was like, what? But she's like super cool, never phased her. She has the ability to meet the anonymous donor when she's 18 if she wants. So far she has no interest, and it really that hasn't phased her at all. In terms of the cancer stuff, I did get reconstruction. And in fact, I've had reconstruction several times. When my mom died, I'd lost a tremendous amount of weight. And I am a Jewess who had like a double D, very large breasts. And I was always uncomfortable and probably ultimately would have done a breast reduction at some point in my life anyway. So after my mother's death, I weighed like 100 pounds, and I decided I'm going to be an A cup. I'm going to be Audrey Hepburn and, be like a dancer and all of this. But I didn't count on the fact that I wouldn't always weigh 100 pounds and that I would recover. And then suddenly my bodies will be, I wasn't Audrey Hepburn is what I realized. And so then I did a corrective surgery to kind of change a little bit. But the bottom line is my reconstruction is definitely less beautiful than almost every other woman I've seen. And I've seen a lot of topless women after post mastectomies, lots and lots. So and I don't heal well, and the scars are very pronounced, and they now hide the scars. But when I did it, it was old fashioned, mastectomy scars, even with the reconstruction. So my daughter has always seen that and known that. And I think just in preparation for this panel, I started getting anxiety for the first time, because I had the option of doing PGD, which is genetic testing of embryos before I got pregnant. And there is the technology to select out the embryos that have the faulty gene, but I didn't do it. I chose not to do it for multiple reasons. And now my daughter, who's 12, has a 50% chance of inheriting this gene. And it seemed like it was a long time away. When she was a baby, I was like, oh, by the time you grow up, there'll be so many better choices. And 12 years, there aren't any better choices right now. So I have that anxiety looming over my head as she goes into adolescence and stuff.
As you mentioned, it's your personal reasons for making the decision that you made, and through all of everybody's diagnosis, people can say, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? Why don't you adopt a kid? Why don't you? And it's like, even with adoption, will a birth parent want to hand their kid over to somebody that's newly diagnosed with cancer? There's so many different challenges that not everybody considers. And as far as the people that do test positive for the BRCA gene, what would be your main message to them?
Well, I mean, when I went through this in 2004, it was a completely different world, and no one had heard about it, and doctors told me explicitly, this is a case of science outpacing our ability to know what to do with the data. I don't know how to advise you. That's completely changed. Now, if you test positive for a BRCA mutation, either 1 or 2, you have a double mastectomy. That's like, that's so I had to be my own advocate, and I just, my heart died when I listened to you, Jen, and I'm being your own advocate and saying, I'm not leaving here without, I have so much admiration for that. And every medical journey, either my mother's or mine or my sister's, we've always had to be our own advocates. And so I guess one thing I would say is that even though the standard now is if you test positive for a BRCA mutation, you have a double mastectomy, and I do agree with that, but still these things are very personal, and no doctor is God, and everyone is going to have a different point of view and a different opinion and a different bias, and you have to do a ton of research on your own and make the decisions that are right for you.
Yeah, can I just expand on that? Because Jesse, I think you're right. And I'm glad that, you know, the personal choices people make are exactly that personal. You know, I cared for a patient who, when Angelina Jolie got breast cancer, went out and got tested.
She didn't have cancer. She did
right.
like me.
Yeah, because of her family history, right? Yeah. So this patient did get tested, and she also had the gene mutation, and she didn't have a prophylactic mastectomy. She did not have her ovaries removed. And I met her because she presented with brain metastases from a breast cancer, and it was triple negative, which is one of the more aggressive ones. And the one thing she did when she saw me was she was so embarrassed and angry with herself that she didn't do what the doctors told her to do. And I think the message that we can send is exactly the one you said at the end. Everything is a choice, and we live and die by our choices. But the BRCA gene is not a 100% guarantee that you're going to have cancer. It's actually the lifetime risk for someone with a BRCA gene is 50% for breast cancer. That's the newest data coming from the New England Journal of Medicine. Yeah.
I've never heard that.
Yep,
in all my travels.
Yep, it just got published. I can send the paper. But here's the point. If you don't have the prophylactic mastectomy and you were counseled, it is a choice that someone makes. And when they come in with breast cancer, the worst thing that I as an oncologist can do is say, well, you should have listened. My job at that point is to say, well, let's take this information we have now. Let's treat your breast cancer. Let's see what you can do. And in fact, because the field has moved so quickly, when she was diagnosed with her breast cancer, which we found after she was treated for her brain metastases, she went on a pill that can treat BRCA-associated cancers and didn't get chemotherapy for the first couple of years. And she actually went into remission from that breast cancer with a pill.
Everything you're saying is completely foreign to me.
Yeah.
I'm on the board of something called Vassar Center for BRCA at Penn's Oncology Center. Yep. And I'm on the advisory board. So I get, every 3 months I get the latest statistics, and it's a wing of Penn's Oncology Center that has hundreds of millions of dollars only poured into BRCA associated cancers. And because especially I'm looking to the future for my daughter, and I'm friends with Dr. Domchek, who runs it, the oncologist. Susan Domchek, I keep asking, what else have we got for the next generation so they don't have the choices we have? And Nobody has told me there's a pill. So if
Oh, no,
what
no,
you
there,
say is
oh, no, no,
true,
this pill, I should clarify. This pill is not prevention. So
No,
your
I-
daughter would never be offered that pill.
no,
The
I
pill, the
know.
PARP inhibitors are for treating breast cancer and ovarian cancers.
I see.
So
So PARP inhibitor
Correct.
treatment for.
It's
I see.
treatment for the cancer rather than
So
prevention.
it's a pill form rather than an IV chemotherapy.
Right. It's a smart pill that addresses the mutation associated with those cancers. But what I
Right.
quote with that 50%, because I saw your face, regarding, it doesn't speak to people with the family histories like you had and your daughter and the worry that you have. The 50% is, and you might also understand this controversy or debate that we're having. We should test everybody for BRCA across the world. Everyone should be tested. If you go by that population risk, this is what I'm talking about. Yep. But regardless, I think, the whole issue of BRCA and understanding whether you have it is because you can prevent cancer. And in fact, for any woman that has ovary or breast cancer coming through any cancer center today, we actually recommend very strongly that they test, because that will inform the entire family's risk, both the men and the women in that family, of what their potential is of getting cancer in the future. And it does open up that world of prevention, preventative surgeries. So we can prevent what happened to mom or grandmother from happening to you as well. It's probably the biggest opportunity we have to affect cancer in the United States today, is to find everyone who is at heightened risk, so we can get them into at least an aggressive screening strategy for breast cancer, but if not, start to talk to them about preventative surgeries. And I think you opened up a whole new world, and you opened up a lot of people's eyes with what you did. I still remember seeing you on Nightline.
Oh, that's kind.
It sounds like there's conversation.
There are a lot of different statistics going around.
Yeah.
For different statistics, if you have, so everybody has the BRCA gene, men and women, it's a mutation. What a BRCA gene does is it's supposed to prevent tumors. So the BRCA gene is like a defense. Well, the doctor can explain better than me, but it's a defense system against tumors. And if you have a faulty one or a mutation on one of those genes, then your defense system is broken. So, you could get cancer from the bad air quality or Diet Coke or whatever. But if you're a woman, your BRCA gene is a tumor suppressor against breast and ovary cancer. And if your suppressor is broken, then you're going to get cancer much faster than somebody else would. And there are different statistics if you're BRCA1, which tends to be a little worse than BRCA2. So, I mean, there's so many studies and it changes all the time. And so it's hard I've never heard a number that low. I've always heard BRCA1 is around 90% chance of breast cancer or 85% chance, but it changes, I guess.
All right. Well, we are going to move on from the statistics, and I really appreciate you sharing your story. And congrats again on your marriage.
Thank you so
It's
much.
really exciting. And I think for everybody, all the panelists, what are there any particular stories that you would love to see on TV about breast cancer or fertility? And what do you feel like audiences need to know most?
Sure. So I'll throw something out there. We ended up having a gestational carrier carry our embryo and turn into our daughter. And I think, while there are all those Lifetime movies and whatnot about crazy surrogacy journeys and, women who want to kidnap the babies or whatever. It always seems to be some really wild and crazy story. And the reality is that many women have to utilize a surrogate to carry their child, and to have like just a regular old story told of how someone uses this as a pathway to parenthood, I think would be really nice for people to see it as an option available to them. Because I mean, for us, when we went down that journey, we didn't know anybody else who had utilized a surrogate. We didn't really know what to expect from that experience, or the difficulties in trying to find a surrogate, and all those things. And so I think that would be a really important and interesting story to be told, for sure.
Yes, I think it'd be very important and good for people to know that that surrogates aren't signing up to run off with their children. We use the surrogate and just adore her. And very sadly, she has breast cancer now. But just a really, really tremendous person that we were like, oh my gosh, we won the lottery with this person in our life.
We felt the same way.
Yeah. So,
I think a couple of other ideas. So two things. One is that, focusing on the experience of cancer among people who are LGBT is a very different experience from women who are cis. For example, most women report after a breast cancer diagnosis, if you're a lesbian, not being offered fertility counseling at all. And it goes beyond just that. I mean, this population is not even being screened for cervix cancer because of this perception they're not at risk. So, I mean, I think parts of what we could do is really focus in on, the disparities on access to care in populations of the United States. And, and I think it's probably global. But I do have women who, are lesbians, and they go in to see a doc and they see two women there, and all of a sudden it's, oh, is this your mom or is this your sister? And there's this presumption of relationships with same-sex couples that still happens in cancer centers. And I think that does impact on services that people are offered, certainly when it comes to fertility preservation for lesbians, as well as for gay men, as options of how you can become a parent, because there's presumptions that gays and lesbians don't want to have children. And tackling that head on, I think, would be a really interesting thing for writers. And then the other thing that I was thinking about was the whole concept of paternalism in medicine, which still does exist, where people have this sense, and I see this a lot in ovarian cancer. We are terrified of ovarian cancer, and Jessica's experience with her mother explains why there's this terror when people come in, and we want them to get treated right away. But we have young women who develop these cancers, and they want to become parents one day. And just the matter of meeting with a fertility doc or just exploring options of parenthood, when someone brings up the question, is a really empowering thing. And people remember those conversations. But I think docs still do what Jessica and Jay went through. They'll say, your cancer's so aggressive, you don't have time for this and you should get treated. And I think that interplay between what a patient wants and needs and doesn't know how to ask for, and what a doc is telling them they need to do, is really a ripe one. I think there's so many stories in oncology, in medical oncology, that can be told that are both gripping and emotional, but also very uplifting and can be very hopeful and inspiring. Because I still think people think of cancer as something that you're going to die of. And certainly it is the experience of people that I meet for the first time in clinic.
okay, well, all things to consider. And I'm sure you've probably explored many ideas, Jessica, with writing.
Well, when I when I was going through the surgeries, I wrote the article in the New York Times and then promptly scheduled my mastectomies. And one of my best friends at the time was a showrunner of ER. And then two other acquaintance colleagues of mine were high-level writers on Grey's Anatomy. And before I knew it, both shows, because they are shows that rip from the headlines, and I did write something in the major newspaper, both shows put it on the air immediately, did the stories immediately. And I was so betrayed and upset with my actual friend who was running ER, because it was the day before my surgery. I'm like saying goodbye to my body and having all these emotions. And he sent me this email basically saying, I'm not asking for your permission, but I'm asking for your blessing. We're doing a 2-part story, whatever. And because I am a writer, my feeling was like, wait a minute, like, how could you, or at least ask me to write it, or,
Right.
And so we got into a big fight, and then I forgave him and we worked it out. But the bottom line is that both of those shows did a great service to the cause, because when I was going through it, nobody had heard of it. And after it was put on ER and Grey's Anatomy, and people talked to me or met me, they were like, "Oh my God, did you see Grey's Anatomy? They took it on Grey's Anatomy. You should really watch that episode." And I was like, "Yeah, I know."
Yeah. Noted. Thanks.
But for years afterwards, when I would meet people, they're like, "I know about that from ER, from this episode." And that is how much of the American public get their information about disease.
Absolutely.
And so even though it did hurt my feelings at the moment, it was a blessing and
Yeah.
a good thing.
Yeah. I think so many people, even, I mean, I was just talking to a friend of mine right before we went online today, who not related to cancer, but lost her father. And TV and film is where people get so much of their information, and you can't even prepare for what death actually is like. Like you said, you're still
Reeling.
yeah, from the loss of your mother, as I am as well. It's not real depictions a lot of times, and so it's yeah, it can be helpful when the information's correct and close to what's really going on. But because that's really where people are like, but that's not what I heard on ER, or that's not what I saw in that movie in Fried Green Tomatoes.
To that point, I feel like when my sister and I went through the death of our mom, everything I had seen in movies and TV is death was like very peaceful and quiet and fade to black. And my experience was, it was violent. It was violent. It was brutal. And my mom, my new husband is 61 years old. My mom died at 60, she's a very young 62. And so her last words were, "This is against my will." So it was, depicting death and or death to an illness like this. I've actually never seen an accurate depiction.
Nor have I. Thank you everybody for sharing your stories and your information. We're going to move on to the Q&A. And the first question that we have is from Laura Benzik. She says, for those on the panel who use gestational carriers, surrogates, can you talk about any fears you had, such as not being able to connect as deeply with the child, the decision, whether to stimulate breastfeeding, etc., and what the reality of the situation ended up being, and any resources available to make it a more affordable option? I did not experience anything I mean, I was, as soon as my children appeared into the world, I was all in. I didn't, I was all in. But I don't know if anybody else wants to go into other.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I will say that the first question that's easy to answer is, in our experience, no, there's not a lot of places to turn for financial assistance. There are some organizations that have grants or loans, but they are few and far between, and it's certainly insufficient for the community of people out there that want to become parents that need the help to do it. As far as the process itself, I think at the beginning, you quickly realize like you're going to have to go all in on trusting a stranger, this person that you have a short window of time to build a relationship with, that they're going to carry this precious thing for you that you have a limited amount of. You know, for us, we started out with 9 embryos, and by the time we got to like the freezing and the growing and the all of the testing, we were down to 3. And so, you know, you've got this limited opportunity. We can't create more. I've had my ovaries removed as a preventative measure, and you're trusting this person that lives in a different state that you don't go see every day to do what they tell you they're going to do and treat their body the way you would want them to treat, you know, yourself if you were pregnant. And you got to trust in this process, which is sounds like the most impossible of tasks, but for us, I think like it took 3 matches to get to our carrier, the one that we finally worked with that carried our daughter. And as you know, as silly and whatever, as hokey as it may sound, like it just worked. Like it was devastating in the process of failed matches and failed opportunity, but our carrier was like meant to be our carrier. And, you know, we developed a relationship with her and her husband and her children, and we still communicate with them. Like Jay said, we're hoping to have another child with her. And, you know, she's a very special person to us. Like there's not a lot of words in the English language to convey like what that relationship feels like and how grateful and ever appreciative we are that she gave us her body and her time, and, you know, gave us the gift of being a parent.
It really is remarkable. I'm sorry, go ahead, Jay.
I was just going to say, I remember people throughout the process would ask Jennifer, the fact that you're not carrying Sadie or you're, you know, the child or the baby, are you worried about not having a connection or missing out on that kind of stuff? I remember Jen saying, what do I care? I don't have to gain weight. I don't have to get new clothes. I get to eat sushi the whole time. And at the end of the road, like we're going to have our daughter. And from something kind of a little bit of a nuance within the Jewish community that a lot of people struggle with, there's a question on like on the Jewish law side of things. And it wasn't so much of a concern for us, but there are segments within the Jewish community where there's a question of even if the embryo is genetically yours, because another person is carrying the child, you know, due to Jewish law, they're the one giving birth, they're recognized as the parent, and there's this whole question of how will they be recognized by the community. Certainly, that was important for us to understand that and to be better educated. That's a whole other dimension of things that some people struggle with, in that sense there too. But you know, she's ours. And due to the hospital's policy, I wasn't able to be in the room when she was born. I wasn't able to cut the umbilical cord, but
I did, and it was really one of the most amazing experiences of my life when they handed me those tools and were like, "Here, cut," and I was like, "Whoa, this is happening!" Like it was wild. And, you know, obviously, had I given birth, I wouldn't have been in that opportunity to do that. But like Jay said, like for me, I think when I got diagnosed with cancer the first time and had a bilateral mastectomy, I already came to terms with like, I'm not going to breastfeed. That's just not going to ever be on the table, even if I do get pregnant. And then with the second go around of cancer, it was like, well, I'm going to be lucky to have a child. So I let go of being able to carry to pregnancy myself pretty quickly and just really held on tight to like, however this child gets here, like we're going to have a child. And like, if I'm not pregnant, I'm not pregnant. Like, I don't care. Like, that's fine. So, and you know, it was a process getting to that point, right? But by the time we were in the throes of the pregnancy, it was just so exciting to know that our daughter was on her way, that the rest of it didn't matter.
All right. Well, we unfortunately only have time for one other question. We went a little long. And the question comes from Roger Holzberg. The BRCA conversation rarely extends to men, yet there are significant mutation implications for men as well. As a man who is a C survivor, is BRCA positive and now on proactive surveillance for 2 secondary cancers, could you offer some advice to men out there about the benefits, challenges, etc., of getting genetic profiles run for their own well-being and the health of their children?
Sure, Jessica, I can take that, but I would love your input on that as well. So we do recommend that the first point after a cancer diagnosis, we recommend that everyone with the cancer get genetic testing, especially for all types of breasts, for all types of ovarian cancer. Men with breast cancer who present with breast cancer should absolutely get tested for the BRCA gene, because that is a sign of a mutation, and we definitely want to rule that out. If someone tests positive for the BRCA mutation, we recommend both male and female relatives get tested. Now, we don't recommend testing for kids. We want to make sure people are tested when they can do something with the information. But you know, you're right. You know, the questioner was correct. There are implications of having a BRCA mutation beyond breast and ovarian cancer. It includes prostate cancer, it includes pancreatic cancer, and those absolutely affect men and women. And there are studies going on about high-risk screening for pancreatic cancer among BRCA mutation carriers, as well as the proper algorithms to check for prostate cancer in men who have a BRCA mutation as well. So the implication, sometimes, and I do get this, it's like women with ovarian cancer will say, so only my daughter should get tested, is that correct? I'm like, no. This is any of your kids could have gotten this gene mutation, and the men, when they have kids, they can pass it on to their children. So let's find out for everybody.
Okay, great. That's really helpful to know. And I believe that is the end of the panel. And I'm going to bring Kate back on to wrap things up and say our farewells.
Wow. Yeah, that was amazing. I think we could definitely talk for another hour easily. There was so much information shared, and thank you, Tig, for moderating and for sharing your own story. And thank you to Jay and Jen and to Jessica and to Dr. Dizon for contributing and sharing your stories and your expertise. It's been super interesting. Sorry we weren't able to get to everybody's questions. If you do have extra questions, you can certainly reach out to Hollywood Health and Society, and we'll try to get the answers for you. You can go to our website, hollywoodhealthandsociety.org, and we can connect you up with experts like those that you met today to learn more or in developing your projects. Again, thank you all. What's going to happen when we log off is a survey is going to pop up for the audience. We'd love for you to give us your feedback on what you thought about this panel. And if you don't get to it tonight, it's going to show up in your email anyway, so you'll have to do it tomorrow. But thank you all so much. This has been fascinating conversation. Thanks to our panelists and to Tig, our moderator. Everyone go home and have some dinner or have a good night. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you very
Well,
Good night.